Can you tell me a little bit what were the conditions in the Minsk Accords, the Minsk agreements that we had
Yeah,
Minsk
well,
one and
actually, it
two?
was going to, okay, the people of the Donbass didn't like it. The people of the Donbass had voted to rejoin Russia. They wanted to be part of Russia. But, and now that has since happened, right? But that only was after the failure of the Minsk Accords. The Minsk Accords would recognize the Donbass as Ukrainian territory, but with a certain amount of autonomy. It would be similar, to the federal system that you have in Switzerland, where the different cantons have a great deal of autonomy, vis-a-vis the central power. The Russian language would be respected, and Russian culture would be protected. So that was the main thing. It was actually a way to return those lands to Ukraine. Again, it's just so terribly foolish. A lot of people felt that Putin was being foolish at the time, and later he said that it was a mistake, that he shouldn't have trusted, the Westerners. And I would have real questions about the enforceability of it. I mean, you have because of the nature of the Kiev regime and the influence of the ultranationalists, would they really grant these people a good degree of autonomy? Would they really protect their language? I guess there are provisions in there, like if it failed, then basically it was a promise for Russia to intervene. So you could say, in a sense, that's what happened. I mean, it was just, they gave it 8 years. I mean, that was, I think, extremely patient before they finally, they finally made a military move. But there was 8 years in which, first those 20,000 soldiers were extricated from the cauldron that they were in. And then the Ukrainian forces were built up by the West, became kind of a de facto member of NATO. And then those fortifications were built, these famous fortifications that Russia is now breaking through at all points. There's still some of, one of the last cities would be Toretsk, but it looks like Toretsk is going to fall, quite soon. The Russians are moving pretty rapidly through Toretsk at the present time. That was one of those fortified cities again, you can say a consequence of the Minsk Accords. It wasn't the intentional consequence, but that was the actual consequence. The intentional consequence, the intended consequence was some autonomy for the Donbass oblasts.
Man, I wish everybody knew this. I mean, even me, I've been following this conflict and talking to you about it a long time, and I didn't even know those were just understanding the Minsk Accords, or those 20,000 troops that were surrounded by the Donbass militia. I don't think people realize how long this conflict's going on.
Right.
And I think everybody just wants this. That's the problem with these conflicts. Everybody picks the date. Okay, February 2022. That's when this war started. Same thing with Israel Palestine, October 7th.
Right.
Yeah.
No. I think, like, Mark Slobodka is right, that he always describes it. People say that was the day that Russia invaded, and you can say that, but you could also say what he says. That's the day in which actually Russia chose to intervene in the pre-existing civil conflict, because it had begun. It began, 10 years earlier in 8 years earlier in 2014. And it was ongoing. It never stopped. The shelling of Donbass city never ended. And it's only now coming to an end, now that Russia is pushing the Ukrainian forces out of the nearby cities, from which they had been shelling Donetsk city.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay, well,
it never stopped. You're right.
right. Well, it seems clear that Russia's going to win this. What's it looking like right now? I mean, do you see a potential for some type of regime change in Ukraine soon? Like, is there becoming civil unrest? And you said we've been talking about a stalemate, but it sounds like it's just the Western NATO countries talking to themselves about a stalemate. No one's talking to Russia.
Yeah. That's the incredible thing, is that they still can't talk to Russia. I mean, that's just it's so silly. But that's, again, how we got where we were, because they refused to actually consider Russia's position. So they still seem to live in the 1990s. There was a time where they could basically ignore Russia, and Russia was so weak they could just do whatever they wanted. It seems like they got drunk on their power at that time, and they just can't give that up. It's just like the good old days where we could just ignore Russia. And so they're still trying to live them, but it's not working. And it's not going to work. But yeah, okay, yeah. There have been some recent, let's say firings and rumors of imminent firings of leading officials within the Kiev regime. It seems like Zelensky is kind of circling the wagons. There are signs. You hear reports of civil unrest or actually guerrilla activity, like attacks on these TCC vans, and I think even recently, like the apartment of a TCC employee. The TCC, those are the press gang guys. Those are the ones that that's the unit that's tasked with forcibly conscripting Ukrainians, they grabbing them off the streets and so on. So anyway, there's obviously a lot of hatred towards the TCC in particular, and apparently a lot of their vehicles have been torched. And then recently, I heard even an apartment of one of these TCC personnel was torched. So there is, nothing. You can't say widespread civil unrest, but there's obviously a great deal of unhappiness. And you can see it, like every time they try to grab somebody, it's not like there are people saying, oh, be a patriot and go to the front. It's just like the woman move in there and start whacking the guy over the head with her purses. And
yeah, that's right.
Right.
The Bushkas are upset.
Yeah, no, for very good reason. I mean,